Okay, call to order the July 5th Board of Selectmen meeting. There are two changes to the agenda. Under citizen departmental requests, number 5 has just been put off for a little bit more work, a few questions that needed to be clarified. And under town manager's report, the review of the annual town meeting timeline, that's just not quite ready yet. So with those changes, we'll accept the agenda by unanimous consent. Announcements.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This meeting is being video and audio recorded. The next Board of Selectmen's meeting after this one will be Wednesday, July 19th. We're on our summer schedule, and there will not be a Selectmen's meeting next week. And we are going to get a briefing, I think, about the 4th of July from the chief and maybe the Culture and Tourism Director briefly.
Good evening. I think the best way to brief this one is to ask you what you think. For the most part, all the feedback we've gotten is it was an overall success. It was probably one of the best 4th of Julys that Nantucket's seen in a long time. Beaches were well organized, a lot of people at all the beaches. The downtown events on the 4th went off without a hitch. I heard the Sconset Fire Department beat the other fire department, but other than that, then the fireworks detail went off without a hitch. There was no major, we had a few arrests in the, over the weekend, approximately, I don't have the numbers in finally, and actually we had a computer network problem today, so I couldn't get everything assembled. But it looks like we had about 35 arrests that were related to the 4th of July that wouldn't have been something otherwise. 14 of those were beach related, 12 of those were non-residents, and there were 2 PCs. All of the arrests were for generally either disorderly conduct or minor transporting and possession of alcohol. I can assure you that if any of the arrests that were made, the individuals had 2 or 3 occasions to not get arrested before they were arrested. So I think all in all, it was a pretty good success. If we have any questions, we still haven't done our debrief yet. We'll be getting together with state police and the other individuals involved to go over the plan to kind of figure out what worked better, what could work better. I don't think we're out of the woods yet. I think a large contingent of individuals went over to Co2. We were able to monitor that. They were going over by private boat, everything else. It worked out pretty well. A group from the town, Harbor Master's office, went over that night and picked up a dumpster full of trash that pretty much had been bagged up by the individuals over there. And I think it worked out pretty well too. I know the fire department had a few runs. They had no runs to the beach from the Nobadeer, but they had a few runs elsewhere. The Marine Department also had 15 rescues by the lifeguards. There was about 6,300 people at the lifeguarded sections of the beaches, which is a small number for the 4th of July. Usually there was 6,300 at Nobadeer alone a few years ago. They had 15 rescues between Nobadeer and Cisco due to some heavy surf, but no major medical or boat incidents. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
Hi. I will just follow up on what Chief just stated, that I think everything went off beautifully, both Monday and Tuesday. The energy at Jetties Beach was really lovely. I don't know how many of you got to be there for the fireworks, but there were families of all types on the beach enjoying the fireworks display, which was beautiful. You could see young kids playing right in the little shore break at Jetties as the sun was setting and the fireworks about to go off. It was literally picture perfect. The activities on the 4th began at 10 a.m. on Main Street. Janet Schulte, the incoming director, was by my side all day so she could learn how the event comes together. There was really great energy on Main Street. I have no idea how many people may or may not have been there. but it was really wonderful, fun, active energy. We had great activities this year. A little short on the volunteers. So for anyone who's listening tonight or in the audience tonight, if you feel like you have some free time in the morning on 4th of July next year, I'm sure Janet and David would appreciate you joining them to help with the activities. Our public outreach campaign to limit water balloons on Main Street, we feel like was mildly effective. However, there were still a substantial number of balloon shards on Main Street immediately after the water fight. The DPW crew and Janet and some other volunteers were on the streets until at least 1:30, if not later, picking up trash and debris. I think that Janet and David are already talking about some stronger outreach efforts for next year, starting a lot sooner in the year and really getting the message out to business owners and the real estate agencies that we need collective community buy-in on what a mess Main Street becomes after the water fight. And it's not just balloon shards. It's almost like any garbage people have in their hands at that moment, they just drop on the street. And, perhaps we can even get some clean team volunteers or other community volunteers to come in afterwards to help us clean Main Street. It's a significant concern, as well as inappropriate use of water guns. We had basically had people filling up backpacks full of water with those hoses that you use for like weed killing and spraying people, and they're just such a high pressure spray. They really hurt people. So I'd really love for the community to engage in a conversation about how do we preserve this as being the fun, spirited event that it's been and that it can be without causing bodily harm or environmental concerns. So, but all of that aside, it was fantastic. Later in the evening, we went to Children's Beach and had games and activities managed by some of our veteran Park and Rec Commission folks like Jack Gardner, Zona Butler, and Linda Williams, and kids had a great time on the beach. And then the Nantucket Music Center's jazz band had a concert. So all in all, I think the activities were well planned and well executed. I'd like to give a major thank you to the DPW. Their team was just absolutely wonderful with us starting at 6 a.m. on the morning of the 4th and straight through the afternoon. The fire department and the Ranney family for a great water fight that everyone enjoyed. Lots of volunteers, and a special shout out to Richard Ray for his watermelon eating contest, which is a perennial favorite. Our 4th of July t-shirts and tote bags that we've sold out of adult sizes, but we still have tote bags and children's t-shirts available for sale. And I'm happy to say that the Sandbar restaurant is going to be selling them on our behalf at their restaurant and then donating the proceeds to the town. So they have a lot more visibility than we get at 25 Federal Street, and we're really grateful to them for selling that for us. And a big thanks to the Clean Team and Cisco Brewers for their excellent efforts at galvanizing what sounds like we're over 200 volunteers this morning to go to beaches, which were thankfully very clean, thanks to the DPW's proactive efforts in putting those garbage containers out. So I think it was a great holiday. Do you have any questions for me? Okay.
Probably just in regard to the balloons, send
Yes.
something out right before school gets out to all the families.
Oh, good idea. Yeah. What we've heard
For buy-in from
anecdotally,
locals.
Yeah, anecdotally on the street was that locals had gotten the message, and that's probably primarily because
Okay.
of what our outreach messages were through social media. It was families who were perhaps renting,
Who were
coming down
visiting.
with those cooler bags full. And, I understand the excitement. It's easy to get swept away, but I think we need a full board community effort to communicate that that's not okay with us.
But it was helpful to have the information out. I know I intervened with
Yes.
a couple families.
Yes.
And told them, not to throw them because of the impact and, stormwater and marine animals. And they're like, oh, we didn't think of that.
We didn't
So-
think of that, right.
So-
Thank you for saying that, Jim. In fact, on Facebook today, there was a gentleman who made a comment about how frustrating it was for him to see that debris. And I've actually reached out to him and gotten his email and phone number, and I'm hoping that he will be number one volunteer next year to help us. So thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Did you want to ask about 4th?
Well, looking forward to next year, I know it's mentioned that we're not quite out of the woods, but I heard some comments that it was hard, that where it worked really well last year because the day before the 4th was on a Sunday, a lot of people had to work on Monday, and it was just really, it was hard to split up the festivities for them. And it's a Wednesday next year. So, yes, please.
The problem is, what'll happen then is the same thing that happened this Monday, is it almost got away from us Monday at Nobody Beach because we didn't have enough police officers to deal with it. And the state won't come over here and do it for us without us participating. And so, I think it's too early to say we can switch back yet. We're going to look and see, and we look at the whole thing. But, we didn't have details, extra help on Monday, and we almost lost it Monday. Even though, overall, it was a very good weekend, Monday was definitely the day that we had a problem, and that's the day when we had very limited number of officers to be able to watch the beaches.
Okay.
I think the other issue we have, because I asked some of my kids that work for me what they did, and what they did was they went to CO2 because they were sort of a little more out of sight and out of mind, and you're not going to get 10 or 15,000 people on CO2 necessarily. Maybe you will eventually, but I think that'll be harder to do, and I think if we go back with social media, we could end up with a bunch of people right on the beach again. It's instantaneous now. So I do think we have to be careful. It's going to take a couple more years to really have the word sink in, that this isn't Daytona Beach. This isn't the place to come and do that. I think that's the message that has to continue to go out no matter what day we do it on.
So we should probably come up with a recommendation soon on how to spread out the dates next year, and so people can know in terms of making their plans.
Madam Chairman, one more quick announcement from ASAP has an upcoming event.
Hi, good evening. My name is Erin Schrader. I'm the Executive Program Director for the Alliance for Substance Abuse Prevention. And we just wanted to announce that on July 15th from 5 to 8 p.m. we'll be having our first fundraiser at the Great Harbor Yacht Club. Tickets are $50 and are available at our website at asapnantucket.org. Or you can go to Mitchell's or Nantucket Bookworks to purchase tickets as well. So we'll be serving some light fare and some non-alcoholic beverages, and we'll be having the band Cranberry Alarm Clock with us as well to be playing hits from the 60s and 70s. So we think it's going to be a good time, and we just wanted to invite the community out. Thank you.
Thanks.
Public comment. Is there anything not otherwise on our agenda that anyone wanted to bring up at this time? Okay, hearing none, I don't believe there's any new business. So I'll move on to approval of minutes, warrants, and pending contracts. I did send in some changes that I think were already incorporated for the minutes. I don't know if anybody else had anything they wanted to note. Okay.
Motion to approve?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Approval of the payroll warrants and treasury contracts.
Motion to approve?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. There are quite a few pending contracts on here. I think Libby wanted to make a couple comments.
There are a lot of them, and a good amount of them are the annual Health and Human Services contracts. I wasn't going to go over every single one unless any board members have questions, except I do want to bring your attention to two of them. The first is the annual paving contract. It's the third page, I believe, of the pending contracts. And it's an amount not to exceed $4 million, and that's an amount that comes out of various departmental budgets, and it's a contractual number. It's not necessarily a number that we're going to spend that amount, although it's possible. So this bid, I was asked by a couple of you how it compares to prior year bids. And the issue with this bid is that there are a lot of units of items within the bid. And if you just look at this, and they range from drainage structures, catch basins, hot mix asphalt, gravel, granite curbing, removal of curbing, labor issues, a whole lot of different things, and they all have a different unit price. The actual paving unit price, which might be something that people are interested in, has gone up by $10 per ton, about a 3.5% increase between fiscal 17 and fiscal 18. I haven't, Brian, I don't know if you did, gone through every single unit item to see about how much they went up. But if the board would like it, we could put that together. And the DPW director and I had some discussion today about perhaps restructuring this bid in the future to more align with paving versus a lot of the other unit items that are in here, which perhaps might open up the bid to more competition.
Good idea.
Is paving the largest line item in dollar amounts?
Well, that's a good question. I'd have to take a look through it. But for example, a catch basin is $6,000. Last year it was $5,000.
Okay.
So that's just it's a big unit item. The
So
paving
there's
of
20%.
Yep. Some things remained the same. As sanitary structure remained the same. A great gate box adjustment remained the same. I mean, I'm happy to send this around if the board members want to review it.
Yeah, I'd like to see it, yeah.
Okay. The next item.
Do you want us to take a vote on the contracts and then?
Oh, I was just going to mention the next contract,
sorry,
the next
go ahead.
big contract. The next big contract is the Nantucket Harbor Shimo Plus Sewer Extension Project construction contract. And that is down a little more on this page. There were 2 bids for this project, Robert B. Auer and another bidder. And our engineer, Kent Nichols from Weston and Sampson, is going to take us through a quick PowerPoint about this particular bid. And we only went this extra mile on this contract because it's quite significant. It's a $12 million project. The construction only, that is.
Thank you, Libby. Good evening. I'm Kent, if you don't remember me, with Weston and Sampson. We've been before you in the past to talk about the Shimo project. It's been moving forward. Now we've opened bids. So as Libby has said, we've got 2 bids that came in. We were kind of hopeful at one point that we were going to get a few more than that. The day before, we were hearing from 4 bidders that we had kind of hoped were going to bid. In the end, we only got 2 bids. Slightly disappointing, but the numbers were good. So the low bidder is Robert B. Auer Company, $12,049,300. A very aggressively low bid. Second bidder was significantly higher, CNC Construction, $18,467,607.50. Both bids obviously significantly different, and so that sometimes raises concerns, so we've looked into that. Both bids also significantly below the engineer's estimate for the work. So
what was that estimate?
Good news. So the posted estimate on the Compass site and in the public ad that we put in the Central Register was $20 million. So as you can see, the CNC Construction bid, had they been the low bidder, would still have been below that estimate. And that's where we want to be anyways with our construction estimates. We want to be up around the second or third bidder, preferably have a few bidders below that number. The big issue with this is that there's a significant disparity between the bids, and that raises a flag for us sometimes. So we've gone back and done some due diligence on this and investigated that, and there's a number of reasons that were justified by the low bidder as to how this works and why he can aggressively bid the project. The first thing we always do is to make sure that there was not a mechanical error or any reason why he had a faulty bid, anything he left out, any concerns that he had. And the second thing we do is we make sure that the contractor intends to do the job for the bid that he submitted, especially when you see that big of a number. So we had immediately upon opening the bids and reviewing the package, we did a detailed analysis of what the numbers were. And we went back and had a conversation with Robert B. Our company about the bid. And they're confident in the fact that they can do the job for this price and that they did not indeed have any errors and that it is the right number. I'm sure they were being very honest when they said they would have loved to have had a few more extra $1 million in their bid at this point because they still would have been low. But in the end, that's the bid that they submitted, and that's the way the public bidding process works. So we do feel confident in their capabilities. They are a very capable contractor. You've had them do a lot of work on the island before. They're well-known in the region. They know the type of work that we're doing. They're actually pretty well specialized in working in these types of soil conditions. They understand a lot of the logistics that surround this project that made it more, I think, inherently risky for some other contractors to bid, and therefore there's not as much risk dollars, I think, in their bid as there were in some of the other contract bids. And I think a lot of that represents, efficiencies that this particular contractor has at play. And so in the end, we sent a letter recommending to the town that you award the job to Robert B. Our in the amount of their base bid, including alternate one, which is some additional conduit work to support the electrical service extensions for the project. That would be in the amount of $12,049,300. So what we're coming to you tonight for is to talk about that and the fact that we are going to seek a vote from you to authorize award. If you vote that authorization, it will be pending the final approval of Massachusetts DEP. This is an SRF, a state revolving fund funded project with 0% financing. So we need to get their formal authorization to award, which we'll work with the town manager's office and staff to get that package out shortly after you make your vote tonight. So I can stop there and take questions.
Did you, was there if you know, a differential between a line item for housing for the two? I just know that people who are more familiar with Island didn't access it maybe sometimes lower because the other people just say, oh, it's going to be a big number. We got to throw a bunch of money at it.
So our items, it's a unit price contract, so we do have unit price line items in the way the bid gets put in, but they're actual work items. They're things like the thing you just discussed, paving. There's unit price items for paving and structures, and in our case, a lot of pipe, and then pump stations and other things. We don't have a separate line item for housing.
Oh, okay.
That gets carried in their overhead and
Okay.
usually gets weeded into some of the line item costs.
All right.
But I will say that there are significant number of items where there's a good difference between the bidders, including things like paving, where it shows that one contractor was probably much more comfortable putting in a bid that they knew what their actual costs were going to be. So. And it is, I think, absolutely on Nantucket, I think the factor of housing and figuring out just the logistics of staff. Labor is hard to deal with. If you got to bring them on and off the island daily, that's just as much of a cost too. So I'm sure that played into it, and the fact that Robert B. Our has done a lot of work on the island and has other contracts with
Good
you
for us.
plays into it. So.
Any other questions?
So I did want to just go through really quickly where we are with the project then. So if we now look at our total budget with the new construction bid in here, we're required to carry a 5% construction contingency of $600,000 odd on this through the DEP for financing purposes. Excuse me. We've also expended to date with amendments a little over under $1.2 million for design and easement services through Weston Sampson. Weston Sampson also has a contract for a little under $1.6 million for construction services related to the project, which is work during the upcoming period of construction. You've got a contract for just under $1.2 million with Hayes and Sawyer for OPM services. We have a line item budget for police, traffic, some specialized vehicles for maintenance of the system through the sewer department, utility service extensions, and a few other miscellaneous pieces that are going to be done as part of the project, adding up to a little under $1.5 million. We have a forthcoming piece of this work. The Select Board previously voted to have the town participate in a purchase of the grinder pumps for the low-pressure sewers. and to offer those back to folks at a reduced rate. And so we will have a grinder pump procurement process, including the purchase of the pumps, the procurement support, and other things. We've penciled in a line item of about 2.5 million budget for that at this point in time. We have a small budget for legal services, and at this point, we've carried about $1 million additional contingency. That all adds up to just under $22 million. You have an appropriation for $41 million, so you can see that you're significantly under your appropriation amount, which is something we've talked about in the past with this board. I did want to highlight the last item on here, therefore, which is there are still a few things that have come up in the design process that we've identified as having some downstream significance that still we think may qualify to be done. So I don't really want to put a sunset on this as a final number quite yet. And we're going to be continuing to talk with David and the sewer department staff and Libby and the town management staff about how to make that really work and what makes sense and what doesn't. And at some point in time, we'll probably come back to you to discuss that as a particular item. But at this point in time, this is pretty good news. When you look at most budgets, it's not often that you can say you're under by, almost 40-something, 45%. So it's actually pretty good news.
Did you use the same pricing methodology for this project as you did for the Nantucket sewer project?
So we did not assemble the original. Weston Sampson was brought on board after the project was budgeted in the planning phase. We did not assemble the budgets for either Nantucket or this project.
Okay.
So the prior budget, I think what we talked about today, if I remember what we talked about with the finance director and the sewer department, was it was budgeted based on an old planning number and then with inflated numbers to get to that $41 million budget. It was intended to be very generous, and we felt it was generous all along. But I would say since my company came on board, we were hired to do the design a little over a year ago, year and a quarter ago, or something like that. We immediately identified the fact that that budget was much more than you needed to do the work that you intended to do. And it's one of the reasons our design number reflects that. So one of the things.
Well, the conclusion I'm going to is that a much-needed sewer project failed because of the overwhelming cost.
Yep.
And now we're hearing that this project is maybe coming at half of that. And if that's an assumption that the same methodology was used for both, we really shortchanged the public with information when we took that. Not you, I'm just saying that we as a body. So.
I think it does
Maybe.
absolutely reflect on your ability to make decisions, and obviously can scare people in doing that.
Yeah.
Our suggestion is that this is a good learning opportunity.
Yeah.
The prior contracts, one of the last meetings I had with this board, we were talking about other contracts that all came in over estimates. And the prior information that we had was that projects weren't being budgeted high enough to sufficiently reflect their costs. So there's a little balance needed
Maybe gone a little too far
to get that right. So we're looking to kind of balance that up, and this is a good learning experience to try to get that tool in. I am actually surprised at the low bidders number a little bit. I would not have been greatly surprised at the second bidders number, but I do think it's a very aggressive bid. It will absolutely help us learn, and I think being able to formulate that into future discussions when you do decide to revisit other sewer extensions is a critical piece of that work. Yeah.
But unfortunately, I think that the bidders are learning as well. If they had bid both of these right now, they both might have come in at this number, but I guarantee we go to bid the other one again, they're going to know how much fluff is still in there.
Yeah, you can never guarantee that you're going to get a really aggressively low bid twice in a row.
Exactly, that's my point.
And one challenge here, the reason we didn't get 4 bidders, and we were talking to 4 bidders the day before the bids, was there are certain challenges with doing work on Nantucket that are really very different from working in other places, and a few of the contractors literally didn't bid because of the risks inherent in that. And had they bid, they probably would have been well in excess of our estimate because of those risks. So there's always that chance that self-corrects again. Absolutely. So the one other thing I wanted to talk about is just looking forward, next steps on this. Assuming you make a vote tonight to award the contract, we have a few things that are going to be continuing on with the project. One of the most notable ones that we like to mention is the continued public outreach. We do have a neighborhood meeting planned out in the Shimo area on the 22nd of July. That is a Saturday, and it's at 9 o'clock in the morning. We also have a plan to come back to you to the BOS meeting in early August on the 9th. And at that point in time, assuming we proceed with Robert B. Auer, we intend to introduce you to the contractor and have him here to answer questions and at least get some time to hear from you folks. And we'll have a few other items on the agenda probably for that meeting as well. We do expect construction to start mid-September physically out there, and we do expect to proceed pretty quickly through the season and hopefully finish it in the one-off season before next May. We will be coming back to you, as I said, we have a budget to do grinder pump procurement, so we'll be coming back to you to talk about that process specifically, the money for that, how the contracts for that will work, and we're working on the details right now with David on that and have been working on that for a while. So as we proceed with staff, we'll come back and advise you on that.
What do you mean by downstream, additional downstream? What is the,
So
is this extensions that maybe we should have done, or what's the?
when we do this, this project has the kind of unusual feature that it's spread out through town. There's a bunch of little pieces that we do. When we do that, we like to look at what happens downstream of those areas to see if there's sufficient capacity in those, and also to see what the conditions are in those areas. And we traditionally identify two different things that happen. One is whether there's some poor conditions that need to be rectified, either short-term, like they're critical, or long-term, like these are, aging systems and they need to have some type of maintenance planned into a CMOM or an asset management program. The second thing we might find is critical capacity limitations. We just can't fit that much flow through the pipe type of things. So to a degree, we've already done some of those in the project. The project that was bid includes replacing all of the existing sewer line on Vesper Lane, which is a very significant long section of road, and there's an existing sewer in it, but it's downstream of the Meadowview area, and that line was laid very flat and doesn't actually have capacity to receive neither the initial flows from this job nor long-term the flows from other areas. So we're actually both replacing that and upsizing it. The challenge is we didn't have all the information for the downstream capacity analysis at the time we assembled the final package because of the schedule. So we found a few more things that we long-term believe would have to, nothing critical, but long-term need to be addressed. And we know a few of those existing facilities that need some attention as well. But there's a bigger picture issue that we also came up with, which is in looking at your ultimate comprehensive wastewater management plan, there's a lot of future potential flows. If you do go back and revisit Nantucket and some of the other areas, Hummock Pond and other areas that lie out around the area, the future passage of wastewater flows from those areas into your existing system need to also be considered. So what we've been talking about with David and with the town manager's office as well is this idea of trying to come up with a really better consolidated plan for that we can fold in so that when we come back and talk about what those are, we'll have a much better feeling as to what's a good investment, when does it have to be done. We are very comfortable that the piping improvements that are included in the job that you've got in front of you are sufficient to get us through when we get the job built. But there's a few more things, that, especially considering the fact that you have still have money left in your appropriation. I think before you let that sunset, you're going to want to think about this issue. And that's all we're kind of highlighting it as a future issue. Let's not get too excited that you're returning $18 million yet.
No, I'm glad to hear
Reserve
that you're doing that. That's a question I ask every time we've had a sewer extension.
Yep.
Is it, will this pick up everything? And of course, the engineers working for the people who have to pay for the sewer tell us, of course it is, but I'm glad to hear that we're looking to see, how's it really going to do it?
Yeah.
And I know of a couple of cases where they put them in and they aren't going to do it.
And
I think
it's definitely it's a complex, it's not like we can crack some numbers and look at some pipe and see where it is. There's a lot of complexities to it, as will be attested by the discussions we've had if you ask
But it's a
some of
lot
the
cheaper to
staff.
it's a lot cheaper to do it once
Right.
than it is to do it twice.
Yep,
And
absolutely.
it's cheaper to buy the pipe a little bit bigger now.
Yeah.
Okay.
And in essence, that's what we're doing. For instance, Vesper Lane, we're putting in a 12-inch pipe, even though
Right.
initially we would only be able to replace some of it with 8 and some with 10. So we do have good thought process in that. We just want to make sure that before you make a decision that you're done with the project, that you've been complete and that we've given you good advice on that. So the last thing I want to mention is we will be coming back to talk about sewer regulations and policies. And I think the position we're in right now with staff discussions is we've decided that we'll probably bring you back a clarification set of connection policies specifically for the Shimo and Plus area project, and just to get that addressed so that everyone on these projects knows exactly where they stand. And then longer term, David is working to kind of update the sewer regulations, and he'll be bringing those back in front of you sometime in the future. So,
And one quick question on the downstream. Is that just pipes and pump stations, or is the wastewater treatment facility, is that considered downstream as well?
So yes, it is. We've had significant discussions about the treatment facility and how it fits in the definition of the way the wording of the appropriation language was. If you remember in the discussions, I know you weren't on the board at the time, but you were paying attention, I know. And the discussion when we came to you with the wastewater treatment plant upgrade is it's not all of the work that needs to be done at the plant. On purpose, it's meant to fit into the current appropriation, and we've been in discussions about a Phase 2 project and potentially some other improvements. That's part of the reason I've been fairly gray in calling these downstream improvements, because there is a little bit of work at the plant that we should talk about, whether it's in this or another type of project.
Right.
But certainly, we already know David has a list of things that still need to be addressed at the plant, and they should be, and they're not really related to today's capacity. It's not like you can't connect these people and flush the toilet and get the flow there.
Right.
They're more long-term improvements that are needed at the plant anyways. So you got to think these systems are fairly complex and they need a lot of specialized attention. So not everything is just pipe not big enough or those types of things. So we're trying to be very thoughtful about that and kind of fold as many things in as we can as we've done the planning, and
Thanks.
hopefully we'll continue that way. So, and that's all I had. So.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh. I have a question in the audience. You just need to cut. I think a quick question's probably okay, but you have to come up.
Thank you. Bruce Mandel, Nantucket. Just two quick questions for the engineer perhaps to ask. Because there was such a variance between the amount of money that was appropriated for the project, what the estimate was, and what the low bid was, first question is, would there be payment and performance bonds required because of that, or just as a general practice? And the second question is, there was an additional project contingency of about $1 million, and I wanted to know who controls that, who makes the decisions on that?
So thank you for asking a question, because I stole Erica's clicker to advance the slides too. And if you hadn't asked, I wouldn't have been able to return it. It's a good set of questions. I guess I'll answer the last one first, which is we always keep a contingency for budgeting purposes. There's reasons for doing that. The biggest one is that when you dig in the ground, you never know what you're going to find. So any type of a project, there's always potential that you'll encounter something you don't know, one. And two, as we do utility improvements, particularly in areas where we don't know absolutely everything about the existing utility systems, there's often a reason that we encounter something that we didn't envision in the design phase, but really ought to be done anyways. And if we had some money left in the budget, we would do it. But frequently, if you spent all your budget, you don't do it. So it's a good reason to have a good set of contingency money built in there. We do have a discussion with the town anytime an extra cost is available. It starts with David because he's in charge of the projects. It then proceeds to the town manager's office, and Libby and her staff get involved. Obviously, finance gets involved, and we talk about that. Significant cost change orders to the contract actually come back to the select board, and we brief them on those as well. So, I think the other question is a little tricky to answer. I wish I could tell you that there was an easy thing to speak, and I recognize that you're from Nantucket, and so some of the questioning of how we get to that is significant. I guess I would go back to kind of the answer that we said before, which is using one job to predict the cost of another job is tricky enough. Trying to predict how one thing relates to something else. One challenge that we have on this job is we were able to have a relatively good vision of what the job entailed from the beginning, and then as we proceeded through design, we could refine what that vision was. So we had a good sense as the project cost developed of how much we would add or subtract to that job, and it never varied to a great degree. The challenge with planning level costs is there's not a lot of detail done in the background, and so when you do that initial scoping, a lot of times it is a kind of a rule of thumb number that you use. So unfortunately, there's a lot of gray area in costing, and I'm not sure that it's easy to say, with any degree of certainty at the planning level phase what things would be and they wouldn't be. I know that doesn't really answer your question, but it's just tricky.
Well, it sounds like there is no paying a performance bond required.
Oh, no, and you're right, I forgot that part of your equation. That's the easy part. Every bid that we put out and every bid that the town puts out should have, there is a performance bond, a payment bond. There's also a bid bond that was submitted in case he decides to pull his bid back. And in this case, that's one of the processes we go through now, the select board. We've actually checked the bonding references for the contractor already. We know this particular contractor's bonding references and they're legitimate. Once the board votes, we'll actually have him actually deliver final payment and performance bonds as part of the contracting process. So yes, all that insurance and other things get processed. But yeah, I apologize. That part, that's a fait accompli. That's always done. So, is that sufficient? Thank you again.
Thank you. Should we vote on the contracts?
Want a
or-
motion to
Yes,
approve all
please.
the penny contracts? I'll make that motion. Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
I'm in favor of all, but the, Brandon, I just want to recuse on that till I see the numbers. Yeah, I'm agree with everything else.
The paving bid, right? Because there was more than one
Yeah, I'd like
Victor
to see
Brandon
that
contract.
before I agree to anything.
Moving on to consent. Gift acceptances.
Motion approved?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Well, I need a second.
Oh, second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Yeah. Motion carries unanimously. Citizen departmental requests. Theater workshop.
Hi,
Good evening.
Madam Chair. Stephen Cohen for Theater Workshop and the applicant. Hopefully, this is a relatively simple application. As you probably know, the Theater Workshop is doing a production of Mamma Mia, and they've asked the Ventos to host a cast party for the cast and for the donors and people like that. And they'd like to have a tent in the backyard with a DJ for the party. So we're requesting an extension of the noise bylaw from 10 p.m. till 11:30. The neighborhood itself, although it's in town at 1 Pleasant Street, one of the neighbors is, Ms. Vento has talked to several of the neighbors and invited them all. Several of them are not going to be in town, so there's no one there at these empty houses to bother that particular weekend, and some of them will be attending. She can give you more details if you'd prefer to hear from her with sort of the street by street of who she's talked to.
I thought it was nice that you contacted the neighbors and invited. I thought that was a very nice effort.
Percentage-wise, how many have gotten back to you, or?
Or
I've just contacted the immediate neighbors. So we're at 1 Pleasant Street, and I contacted 98 Main, and that's the Taylor family, and they won't be here until the end of July. And then on the other side is 3 Pleasant, and that's the Larson family, and it's just one individual there, and he cannot attend, but wished us well. And then behind us, which would be 96 Main, is an empty house that's being gutted and renovated over the next year and a half, so it's immaterial. And it won't start until 8:45 because the production starts at 6 and it goes for 2 hours and 20 minutes, so hence the reason we have to, at least have a 2-hour or 2.5-hour party.
I have a
Comment?
Well, could it go to 11 instead of 11? I get worried about having DJs downtown. We're having this issue, with some of the restaurants. I get worried about that noise in the core district. I think that's, is there?
Yes, we can go to 11, that's fine.
11 would be all right, too, yeah.
Sure.
It's up to, there's more than me here, but I'm just, as one person.
Any other comments?
We had neighbors the other night at the same house go until 1:30. Of course, we didn't complain, but I don't know if others did. It was about 50, 20-something-year-olds there. So just to give you an idea of what does occur and no one complains about.
That's the parents giving it to their young adults and staying away.
Exactly.
There's a couple weekends they do that now.
I noticed.
I'm comfortable with 11:30. I assume are you going to have amplified music?
It's going to be a DJ, it's not going to be
DJ,
anything
okay.
other than
So it will
So
their
it's not a band. It's-
standard equipment.
So 11:30 is fine with me.
Someone want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve the request as presented.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
All those in favor of that motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Opposed.
It's 4-1. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Next, we have another request for the Friends of Nantucket Public Schools. This, for the new board members, has been an annual request. I think someone could probably make a motion.
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Eleanor, for coming. Okay, next, Small Friends request. Is there someone here from Small Friends?
Jackie McGrady, I'm the Development Director for Small Friends, and we are requesting to hang banners from the light posts on Main Street, similar to what the Boston Pops for the hospital did 2 years ago, I think, and the film festival did last year, or maybe that's reversed. But we'd be using the same light posts, the same size sign, same material sign for a week to advertise our art and artisan show.
Questions, comments?
Should I recuse or recuse? My wife's executive director there. Should I not be involved? Any recommendation?
I would say yes.
Okay. Should I sit out there? Okay.
If you're going to recuse, yes. Thoughts, comments? We did institute a policy maybe a year and a half ago on these type of banners. I think there was some discussion that it would generally be festivals that have, something like every 5 years, 10 years.
I know that we are restricted, that if you were to approve the signs this time, that we would then have to wait 5 years to apply again.
That's right. The HDC did already approve these.
We looked back at some of the history of this a little bit, and the policy was adopted in April 2015, and there was some discussion at your meeting about making this more for festival-like events. However, during the meeting, that idea did not proceed forward.
Okay.
So there was talk about it, but that's not how the policy ended up. We noticed a typo in the policy, which we'll correct, but it doesn't substantially change anything. So,
So it seems consistent with the policy that we adopted.
I'm not sure it's consistent with the intent of the policy, though. And the reason I'll say that is the maximum period must be removed the last day of the festival. That's the last part, so it's talking about festivals in particular. When we adopted this, there was some strong concerns that this would be an every week thing with all different people coming in and wanting to have signs. And we wanted to limit it at some point to every 5 years and to things that were for, the entire community, just different discussions. So I'm not sure the intent was for fundraisers necessarily. And so, I think I'm going to vote for this, and I think it's a great thing, but I think we really do have to think about it. One of Rick Atherton's concerns was that we were going to end up with, we would end up with these signs up 5, 6, 10 times a year, and then they lose they're no longer special. They're not special for the event themselves, and it becomes kind of sign pollution. You don't even notice it anymore. So I do think we should readdress it. Even if we approve this tonight, we should readdress it and make sure we define that more
Put a
clearly.
little more detail into the policy.
I think so, because if you know, I don't know how many fundraisers are on this summer, but there's, you know, hundreds. And if they all can come every so many years, we could end up with signs all summer long. And I don't think that that's sort of our intent.
I'll make a motion that we approve this request, but contingent on coming back to this board with an agenda item to consider limiting them to festivals as is implied in that proposal, with that policy.
I'll second that.
All those in favor of that motion?
Aye.
It passes
Thank you.
unanimously. Thank you. Request for appointment of constable for a 3-year term.
So moved.
Second. Oh.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Jason, you can vote on this, the constable appointment. The constable appointment. Okay. It's unanimous. Okay, 5 is off. Public hearings. Public hearing to consider modifying the entertainment license of Nantucket Prime. We'll open the public hearing. Did the applicant?
Madam
Okay.
Madam Chairman, there is a summary of this matter in your packet. And I think that can you go to the summary, or are you trying to get to it? Oh, sorry. So just to maybe give a little bit of an overview of this, unless one of you all wants to do it.
Do you want me to do it?
Sorry?
You want me to do it?
Sure, go ahead.
So there have just been ongoing complaints about visibility of this TV. But recently they have put up some screening. They've made the TV smaller and at more of an angle. And town administration has made a recommendation in our packet that, understanding that the Prime TV is allowed per the entertainment license approved by the board, and that in order to modify the entertainment license, certain statutory findings must be made, and that recently the board has indicated a desire to revisit the conditions of all entertainment licenses, generally later in this year. It is recommended that no further specific action be taken at this time. We hope that Nantucket Prime will uphold the voluntary agreement to keep the TV as discreet as possible, like it has been recently, not facing towards the road. So that's the recommendation of administration, and a very brief background on what's been going on. We did have a recent letter from the Civic League detailing the worries of the community. And this is a public hearing, so if anyone would like to speak on this matter, they can at this time.
Good evening. I'm Peter Morrison, co-president of the Civic League, and I'm here just to make 3 points that were approved unanimously by our executive board. First of all, the Civic League appreciates the steps that Nantucket Prime has taken to mitigate this visual and audio contamination, and we trust they'll continue. Second, the Civic League understands that statutory restrictions govern any town change in license. We support town administration's recommendations, and we will follow progress as the public hearing nears on the license renewal. Last and most important, the Civic League urges the Board of Selectmen to adopt an explicit policy governing the public placement of television sets within Nantucket's cultural district to respect the district's historic integrity and ambiance. If you have an established policy in place, we feel it will avert appeals from applicants who will be pointing to other establishments and asking, in effect, they're doing it, so why can't we? Thank you.
Are there any other public comments? Alan? Then John next.
Thank you. Alan Reinhardt. I'm Vice President of the Civic League, and I just want to emphasize the visual blight that this particular television had, its position, the volume before they made the adjustments, I mean, you could clearly hear this. Since the letter which appeared in the newspaper, I've received over a dozen phone calls, people stopping me on the street saying, how can the town, particularly after all we've gone through to get this downtown cultural district established, allow these televisions, again, the visual blight and the noise. So I just want to echo what Peter said, and we support your decision here, but we do want you to take a look as far as the policy. So again, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Wagley, come on up.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. My name is John Wagley. I live about a block from this particular site where this goes on, and I have the same thing, or I got the same thing you have in your packets. And I just want to make a couple brief comments on that. The first one was the staff or the administration gave you, on July 2nd, they did up a précis of the history of this thing. And they did note that after the December hearing you had on this license, that several suggestions were made as to how this noise and visual pollution might be ameliorated. And they have repeatedly said they will cooperate and try and do something about it. Since they've opened, there have been complaints in April and May, including their attorney wrote one letter saying that, which you have in your packet, saying that it's been open for 3 consecutive seasons and there are no complaints about this. Well, that is not true. I myself have complained at least 5 times. I've talked to the manager and they sent me off to talk to the owners of the Jared Coffin House, but they're invariably polite. They're very nice, and they'll turn it down for about 10 minutes. And then you come back, because I walk the dog there, I go by this site usually on foot about 3 times a day, so I'm very familiar with what's going on there. And you're, in the staff report to you, one of the things they talked about was this thing blasts right onto Broad Street, Center Street. It was turning the television around so it didn't blast out on the street, but directed the people they said it was directed to rather than all the passerbys and so on in the street. And I think that even though it's suggested here that you kind of kick the thing down the road a bit, but maybe at least until you have a chance to address it further, they could be asked, as they have been consistently asked, to turn that television around so it's right on the, you're not far from it. You can't miss it. You can hear it sometimes halfway down Center Street, and you can certainly hear it halfway down our residential streets when you hear it. And you can go by it yourself. And they've said one of the reasons it's a business model that helps bring in business, which is important. And one of the reasons was a lot of people are tired after a hard day's work, or visitors want this and so on, and they like it. In fact, one of the reasons was that among the other people, it's a particular boon to tourists who, after a hard day of being tourists, really like to sit down and listen to this television or watch it. But if they want to do it in the property, so they only hear it on the site rather than out in the street, you can go to the corner, and as if there were no complaints, but you'll hear them. You will hear individuals walking by saying, "My God, I can't believe this is going on in Nantucket." And you will not hear anybody say they're stopping there because they've got to desperately watch what is being offered, not only to the patrons, but to the passing by public. So I would hope that maybe you could ask them to say there have been several suggestions that they do this down this afternoon. Among them, turn this set around, get a smaller set, turn the volume down, and they do from time to time. But at 3:45 this afternoon, at that site, the huge television set was still there. It looks like about a 2x4 when you look at it. It is out facing the street, and the volume was not on. They did have, instead of the television, they had music going out, which you hear on the other side of both sides of Broad Street. So I just hope maybe you'll consider in the interim while you're waiting to address this issue, as the Civic League suggested, that you might ask them again if they would turn that television set around so it did not go out in the street. And thank you very much.
Are there any other public comments?
My name is Mary Ann Hanley. I represent Nantucket Prime. Matt Sullivan, the manager, is here with me. A couple of things that I want to clear up before I address some of the comments is, first of all, there are currently no violations existing on our property. My client was served with a notice of violation, but there's never been a violation of the entertainment license. That was set forth in the minutes of last December's meeting, and there haven't been any conditions that have been violated. So for the record, I would just like to make that clear. Television that's outside is allowed under our entertainment license, as well as some music and, some other live music. We haven't had any. The presence of the television and the requirements to modify our license are governed by statute, and those statutory requirements aren't met here. It's not a danger to the community. It doesn't increase public safety hazards. It doesn't prevent an unreasonable level of noise in the area. Our patio is only open until, the entertainment license is only until 10 o'clock at night, although there are other entertainment licenses in the immediate area with outdoor entertainment until 1 a.m. So my client has really worked to try and make things a little bit better, or to appease the board as well as the neighbors. It's a smaller TV. It's not used as often. Very rarely, the volume is not turned up because most of the time people are watching sporting events and they don't want to hear John Madden or any of those other people. They can see the action on the TV. We can only turn it so far because of the way that the bar is constructed. The placement of the bar was authorized by the HDC. Because of the size of the television, we can only turn it so much. It's just otherwise it's not visible. I think that you have in your packets photos of other establishments where there are televisions outside from daytime. They are visible from the street. They don't have screening, but we've gone the extra step. We put up some screening that really, if you go to the last slide, you cannot see anything from Center Street anymore. I know that that was a concern for some of the Center Street people, but you certainly can't see it. If the town is going to enact some other regulations this fall, that's the town's purview. I understand that perfectly. My client will continue to try and run the TV the way that it has been run recently with the changes to try and keep people happy. If there are people in the neighborhood or in the audience that would like to complain to us, we'd love to hear it, okay? In the 5 years, we've never gotten a verbal complaint from somebody in the public, okay? This is Matt. He's there most days during the summer until late in the evening. Any of the neighbors, if the noise is too much, or if you're being bothered by something else, go over and talk to him. He's happy to speak to you. What he's doing is really not any different than several other restaurant owners are doing. He's trying to make a living. He's trying to appeal to his customers. As far as the regulations on entertainment, you certainly are able to do that, but I think that the town needs to keep in mind that over-regulating in the historic area is not going to be good for business. It's not going to be good for tourism, and it's ultimately not going to be good for any of us. I read an article in the Globe the other day that talked about historic Williamsburg. It's losing $148,000 a day because people aren't interested in that type of historical preservation. Frankly, they can get it on the internet now. But I think it's really, really important for us to be not the cultural police that I don't like this, but what's appropriate, what's fair, and how can everybody be accommodated. I'm happy to sit down with some of the board members, talk about those policies before they get promulgated. I think it's very important for us to stay historic, but to stay current. You know, when I walk down Main Street, I see Pacific National Bank. When I walk down Center Street, I see the Jared Coffin House. I've been here a long time, and my heart still goes, look at those beautiful buildings. But you know what's the best thing about those beautiful buildings is that they've managed to stay in business. You can still do banking, you can still go to the inn, you can still sit down and have a drink there. And it's really important to keep our historic gems functioning in the modern day world. Thank you.
Thank you. If there's no further public comment, we'll close the public hearing. What's the pleasure of the board? I mean, I got complaints about this back when I was on the HDC, and I think that the big issue was that it really jumped out at you when you drove down Center Street, kind of right into it, and it was bigger TV. I think that they have done some things to mitigate it. I think that we do need to talk about some broader policy issues just because the town is so populated and busy. But I'm comfortable with town administration's recommendation at this time.
I'll sort of wade in. I'm comfortable with it as well, but I think it's a slippery slope. I think the big TV was, in my mind, was the flashpoint, and I think I think we need to talk about that. Is that where we're heading? You know, can everyone put as big a TV as they want, wherever they want, because we don't have a specific rule written somewhere? I think some of this is, you know, kind of, what's the definition of pornography? You know it when you see it. You know, when you see a TV that's, you know, 2 or 3 times bigger than every other TV, I mean, and, you know, that's not appropriate. I think the one you have now, I think, is fine. I don't even think we'd be here if we had a smaller TV tucked in the corner, like it kind of is now. And I think what has happened is, you know, people had a visceral reaction to something that was really not Nantucket. And I think we have to be very careful to protect. You know, I think I agree with not being, you know, Williamsburg and being careful, but at the same time, we have to protect the things that, you know, that people want to come here for. They don't want to come here because it's Disney. They don't want to come, you know, for that sort of thing. So we really have to think, how are we going to handle this? You know, I'm comfortable with the recommendation, but either through the HDC or through the HDC and some bylaw changes. I'm not sure what it is, some regulations, but I think we should talk about this in the fall.
I agree, and I think the HDC might be a more appropriate place. Once we have a clear policy, which I think right now we don't, but once we have a clear policy, I think this falls under HDC more than, I don't think the board, the slippery slope would be having the board spending time deciding where TVs are going. And I would also say, you know, and this is part of the policy discussion, is that looking at a giant TV coming down Center Street isn't Nantucket, but when you walk around looking into there's TVs all over the historic district. So I think this is really part of the entertainment license discussion that I think we really do need to have as a newbie to this. I would like to see a clear policy. So I would also support the town admin's recommendation.
Somebody want to make that motion?
A couple more comments.
Okay.
Because I chaired the meeting when we discussed this entertainment license, and, you know, reflecting back on that one thing I wish, one regret I have is that we didn't put more clearly into the license the suggestions that we made, and that we didn't think more carefully about the consequences of 4 TVs. I just remember the careful consideration we gave to the applications or license requests for, I don't remember the name, the entity was the former Harbor Place, where we talked about size of speakers and numbers of chairs on the lawns, if you all remember that. And it was which direction the speaker can go in, and so that was a very thoughtful, you know, prescribed process. And I think looking back, I wish we had done some of that here. I do think that TVs are the purview of the Board of Selectmen. That's part of the entertainment license, so it's part of the entertainment license, so I wouldn't want to give that up. But I don't hear a solution other than what's been offered, so I'll support this recommendation, and I'll make the motion to do so.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Thank you. Town managers report.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. The first item is a public records law update. As the board will recall, a new Massachusetts public records law took effect on January 1st, 2017. We gave you an update about it sometime last fall. And as a result of the requirements of the law, we established a position in our Office of Records Access Officer, and that is Florencia, who's here taking minutes. And we have recently also made Florencia our public outreach coordinator. I think most of you know that. And really, this was just to let you know that one of the provisions of the law was that guidelines must be posted as to how members of the public make and get action on requests for public records. And our guidelines have been posted. Eric is pulling up here what our guidelines are. We worked with town council on this, so we just wanted to let you know that we are compliant with that law. Thank you. And Florencia and Erica and other people in our office worked hard to get us compliant, so thank you, guys. Secondly, review of the November 6th, 2017 special town meeting timeline and potential warrant articles. There is a timeline in your packet. I sent it around to some of the people who need to be involved in developing the warrant and getting things set up for town meeting, and no one really seemed to have any particular issues with any of the dates. And I thought that the board, you don't have to certainly conclude any of this tonight, but I wasn't sure if you wanted to have discussion about potential warrant articles. There were some listed in your packet from last week, which carried over to this week's packet. And I think there's one main reason why we have scheduled the special town meeting, which is, I think, having to do with a zoning bylaw amendment pertaining to the location of potential retail marijuana establishments. And we also would recommend putting the fire station, a supplemental appropriation article for the fire station on there. And then there are some other things that I listed in your packet that you might want to think about. The land bank school property transfer and a home rule petition. I think everybody knows about that. Might as well get that done if we can. And then there were a couple of other things which certainly are not critical, I don't think, to be done immediately. They're totally up to the board. But I was asked, what else would the town consider perhaps putting on a special town meeting warrant? And those were the things that came up. So just to quickly take a look at the timeline, the major dates would be that you'd review potential warrant articles perhaps tonight if you wish to. Again, at your next meeting on July 19th, the warrant would be open for any non-town articles from Thursday, the July 20th until Friday, July 28th. FinCom would have some review. We'd compile the warrant. You would adopt the warrant at your meeting on Wednesday, August 23rd. And from there would be the various public hearings for Finance Committee, Planning Board. The FinCom would adopt motions to warrant articles at the end of September. At the following meeting, you all would review motions and comments. And then we proceed to go through that rest of the timeline and have the special town meeting on Monday, November 6th, starting at 6 o'clock. There is also likely, if presuming we're putting the fire station on, a need for a special election for a debt exclusion for the fire station. And the town clerk has put forward some preferences as to dates on that, and the preference seems to be December 6th, I think it is, 5th or 6th, whatever that first Tuesday of December is. So that would be another recommendation, but we don't have to decide that tonight. Okay.
I think this is fine. My suggestion would be that anything that's complicated should be in early enough. It should be in August 3rd is FinCom review of citizen articles. We should be, if things don't come in finished, I think we should be recommending against them strongly, because I think what I've seen through a few rounds of this is stuff is half baked for most of the time, and then we're forced to vote on it, And we're uninformed, the citizens are uninformed, and the impacts, no one knows. And some of them are going to have some very severe financial impacts on the town. And so I just, my hope is that anything that comes forward has numbers attached and is credible. And I just, there's my plea.
But I think as we've talked about, we have a scarce asset, which is staff time. And I think the process of going through and discussing tonight, which I hope we will, the possible warrant articles, will give the staff some scope about how much time, and by something not appearing, I would hope that would send the message that May isn't how a lot of staff time should be spent. And my other question about the timeline, last two things occurred at the annual town meeting. One is we had a very late planning board motions, I believe, up until I think they met on a Friday, and we were adopting motions like a couple days later. And we only had one night, I believe, to review the FinCom motions. And it looks like there's a little more time. So we have between, Olivia, I'll defer to you. So
I am cognizant of that, and because we're doing this so far in advance, I tried to work a little more time in for the FinCom motions. So FinCom would adopt its motions to warrant articles on September 26th, and the board would review them and have any comments adopted at your next meeting on Wednesday, October 4th. So hopefully that's
good
enough.
Thank you. I saw that.
I think because to vote the special town meeting, it was 3-2, and one of the reasons that Jim and Matt, we didn't want it was it's just more work. It takes us away from bigger things. So I think keeping this smaller and things that aren't time sensitive maybe shouldn't be on it. So it can be for staff, but for us, I just wanted to throw it out there that I was cognizant of what you guys were saying a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, there's a lot to do and to ensure, and some of it we don't control. Some of this is citizen-driven articles, but we have to live with the consequences. Our Libyan staff have to live with the consequences of some of these articles that may potentially cost the town a lot of money. And then, so then they're short-staffed and they're looking for money and they're looking for other ways to raise money. There's a lot of things that happen. And so I just think that we have to be, not be afraid of trying to tackle those early on and having those difficult discussions rather than get to town meeting and, sort of have a popularity contest. My opinion, we're not here to be popular. We're here to do what's right for the taxpayers and the citizens. And sometimes that is lost in these town meetings. When people can bring their friends out and vote themselves and walk out, we have to take a strong stance against things like that if they miraculously, magically appear, so.
So really, to that point, we've got the two items first on the list, which is, do we have a zoning bylaw or change, or do we have a moratorium? And in the document we got from town council, she said, I believe, about 70 communities in the Commonwealth are considering moratoria. I sent to really give communities the time to figure out what they really want to do before, while also in that, she mentioned, I think there were 70 or 75 bills at various levels of consideration at the State House that were going to have impact on this. And then finally, so I think the idea of a moratorium, I hope we give it some consideration tonight. I also asked Libby, as I've been doing my research, I'm not a physician or a healthcare direct provider, but I know I've worked in environments where the impact of folks with substance abuse is very critical and discernible. And I circulated to you, asked Libby to circulate a document prepared by the CDC that came out in January about. And I'm not talking about whether marijuana is addictive or not, but just really thoughtful, very thoughtful reading. I hope you get a chance to read about, this is a very serious conversation we're having. We're talking about, the youth of our community, and we all talked about the opioid epidemic. So I think it really deserves some time and thought and energy that we're putting into it tonight. So thank you.
One of the conversations we had at agenda meeting today was perhaps this is a topic to do some strategic planning on and try to get to some agreement and do that prior to deciding what our answer is. I think, and I agree with Jim about how serious it is, but I also think that a moratorium might be kicking the can down the road where we might want to decide what it is a community we do want and go to bat for that at this town meeting, So I think that
would be fine, but in the absence of having that, which I brought up last week, I said we should have that conversation. This is a policy decision. Let's get people involved. I reached out to ASAP today. I didn't hear back from him. I reached out to to Dr. McNabb at the Board of Health. They've not brought this subject up. We may bring it up at our meeting in August. Just get there, have really a community conversation about it. And if we can get that done, so I just throw that out there again.
I think it's difficult to do in the summertime. It's part of the problem is.
Well, then we don't have a special time.
I know, I understand, but I'm saying it's difficult to do. Everyone's busy, trying to earn a living and trying to, potentially enjoy themselves. And I think that's always been, sort of one of the things. And the other thing that's kind of sad to me with the whole marijuana thing is, and I think I've said this before, is I understand its use, medical use, and I understand a lot of people use it, and I don't have a problem with that. But I do think that we've sort of lost our way a little bit. I grew up and we were teasing our parents to get them to stop cigarette smoking, and now we've got a whole generation that thinks that it doesn't harm you. A lot of the young people that work for me are, oh, it's natural, Matt. Natural stuff can't harm you. It's fine. And I'm sitting there going, well, coal dust is natural and cigarettes are natural and they're harming people plenty. And so I think the pendulum is swinging again, and it's, I think we'll see the results of this loosening in this country in the future, But at the same time, I don't think, I'm not willing to fight it. I think it's going a certain way and people have voted, but I think that we should be thinking of how to moderate it, maybe is the word. I don't want to see marijuana cafes. I think we've got smoking out of the bars for a reason. I don't think we should reinstate it, but.
Well, yeah, my understanding on the cafes is the current proposal is that we would have to opt in as a community. Yeah. So we're not really talking about that at this stage. That's something else that could be brought up. And, being someone who's watched cigarettes get phased out, I'm not really crazy about public smoking of anything, because I just think it's very detrimental with secondhand smoke and so forth. But my intention of the special town meeting was to actually just put some zoning in place so we would know where the retail could be located, and that would be the idea, that it would be like any other retail store where you go and you buy it and take it home with you. I am concerned that proposing a moratorium is going to really upset the community, as the vote was 61% in favor of allowing it. So I think it's better to just figure out where it's going to be. And I definitely support having more conversation about it, on how to structure it exactly. And maybe we can even get it on the next agenda. But it's a matter of course, getting players here to talk about it.
And I think there's more. I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, and I think that we should obviously be doing the fire station. And I would like to see us add that land bank swap to get the playground. I think we just need to get that done quickly. As quickly as possible. So from our perspective, and I know there will be others from planning and from the community in general when the warrant opens, but those three for me are what I think we should be putting on.
And this MGL acceptance of the special safety zone, that was an article that
That's something we should probably-
should have gone in last and got left off. So in order to really have a speed restriction, we should do that too.
I mean, all of those others, I think, are
Yeah.
pretty quick and easy, things that make a lot of sense.
Yeah, I'm fine with everything except the moratorium. I agree with Jim and what you were saying, Matt. Let's just deal with it. Let's just start the conversation. I'm not in favor of a moratorium, but I am in favor for the zoning to be able to control where it goes.
The other options we have is we can control the number. I think we could say none, we could say one with a resident with the commercial aspect, and we could say X% of our liquor licenses in those zones. So, there was kind of a wide range, and that all may change as the state works through these bills. Some of that might change as well, but I think that's going to be, I think, the biggest decision is, is it open to as many that want to do it, or is it something that we're keeping a small number?
And, and I wanted to have the discussion, which we just had about the moratorium, just because it was an option. I think Dawn, being the pragmatic person she is, says, let's just get a zoning article, and I agree with that. But anything we can have, anything we do to have a more of a community conversation about this, I think would be beneficial.
I was just going to add about the number. When we had our education about this, currently the act, if you recall, the attorney mentioned that there's a lot of gray in here and a lot of things that still need to be clarified. And it appeared as though if you were going to limit the numbers, you would have to have a town meeting vote and a ballot vote. So I don't know if that's changed or not in the final analysis. We'll have to find that out. And then we would want to know if we can put it on, if it is like that, could we put it on the one we're having anyway?
Well, there are also some...
For the fire station, you mean?
There are also some ordinances that we may want to, right now, as the way I interpret it is, we have to have an ordinance that regulates the sale of it or use of it or carrying of it around the schools. So that doesn't, that's the way I interpreted that. So and I think there was a series of ordinances I think we should be taking a look at that may need to be on the ballot.
We talked about that at the agenda meeting as well, and one of the things that I think remains somewhat unclear is how a municipality adopts regulations that contain some of the things that you just mentioned. Is it by a vote of town meeting, or is it the regular regulation process, which is a public hearing before the board? So that I don't think has been resolved yet in the legislation.
Okay, maybe the cautionary note, kind of like the zoning was, do it on election and put it on the ballot. But
So I guess a question is, can we somehow through town meeting establish licensing authority similar to what we do with liquor licenses, or?
That's a good point, yeah. We need some professionals.
And I think it's still a moving target for them, but maybe we need to put in a couple of placeholder.
By the time you adopt the warrant, supposedly this legislation is on a fast track and it should be complete well before then. And a lot of people are watching it, and including our office and including town council. So as soon as we have final, I'm sure we are going to have another discussion and maybe even have the attorney come back and give us an update.
But I think the main thing would be to try and actually adopt, rather than just putting it off. Try and actually adopt what we think makes sense, and over time that may need to be changed.
So should we have a conversation about where we want these? I know we've talked about the adult uses or adult, that's part of town. Is there, I think that'd be beneficial to have that conversation tonight. Does anybody remember exactly where those are? Libby?
I think Andrew had some ideas, but he couldn't be here tonight.
I don't have a map.
No, he couldn't be here tonight, but it was
Isn't that up at the airport, or?
CN, CTEC, maybe CMI.
Oh, I thought it was where we were talking about where we have the adult uses bylaw.
Well, he was talking about specific zoning districts, which are in a few different locations.
Well, that would broaden the location. That wouldn't be that wouldn't be as restrictive as I thought one option would be, which would be the adult use location.
What's, I just don't remember.
That was
Remember,
discussed.
a year ago, we had to say, for right of, freedom of, whatever, right of free speech, you could have whatever adult bookstores or whatever. And then there was a bylaw that said they got to be in this area. I thought it was out by the airport. I could be wrong.
I think you're correct.
Yeah. And I thought that was at least I'd heard some scuttle. I'd be concerned about anywhere in CN, or I would like to have it in a, narrowly defined area.
I was a little worried about CN as well. I was asking Andrew, and he was saying that most of the CN neighborhoods, there would be also some sort of special permitting that you couldn't have it in some of them, but I would tend away from CN.
So I wouldn't be in favor of anything other than the adult use area.
But we need to see that on a map.
Yeah, we need to see it on a map.
understand
Yeah,
what it means.
that allows a
But
couple of locations, but I
But
just don't
CTAC
remember offhand.
and CN and all that would be, opening the barn door or closing the barn door, whatever the expression is. So we can we do that next week with Andrew?
At your next
That
meeting.
19th.
I mean, at our next meeting?
Oh, he
Pardon?
won't be here on the 19th.
Well, we can get somebody to come.
But maybe something
Leslie,
can
can Leslie-
get written up prior
Maybe
to
Leslie
that.
can come on his.
So at least if you had some recommendations, we could at least discuss.
Yeah, I
them.
mean, there might be a minimum lot size, or there are different provisions that could be put in that aren't necessarily that it's this zone, but it's this zone and it's by special permit, and it's a minimum lot size or something.
And on the other hand, we have to
Or
be careful that we're not
distance from a
too
school. It
prescribed.
can't be too restrictive.
Right. So that's what
It
led
has to
me,
be a
that's why I
viable-
was interested in the adult use, because it is for adults, not children. But
There's zoning. I mean, further discussion a bit as well. Matt, I think tying it to the liquor license, particularly because I think we need to have a discussion about liquor licenses. Does anyone have any thoughts on numbers or quantities?
Well, a percentage, I mean, how many liquor licenses?
Yeah.
I think we have
98.
93
no, it
maybe?
was a liquor license where the liquor can be purchased and used off-site. That's
No.
the definition of.
Right, but I
in
mean,
the
one
law.
of the potentials in terms of limiting the number of shops
Right.
was to be a percentage of your liquor licenses, like 10%.
No, but it's a percentage of the liquor license given to establishments
to-
that buy the liquor and use it off-premise.
So package stores,
Like package stores, and we only
Right,
have
right.
6 or 8 of those. We don't have, that's not,
I see.
right? So it's,
Okay,
There's,
okay,
That's a lot
I see,
better.
I see where, I get what you're saying now.
No thoughts yet on numbers? I mean, I
Or it
don't,
could be a percentage of as many,
yeah.
half as many as medical is allowed, but we currently only have one proposed, so.
and we also haven't, I need to understand more the whole, the manufacture of it, the storing of it, that wasn't all clear to me. Is that all what part of the retail establishment? Is that another location on the island?
I think Matt said it, but I don't know if it's possible. This does seem like a facilitated discussion would be wonderful because it is complex, it is very important, and getting it right this time
I
in
think,
November.
I think we're all more informed than we were when town council came. Maybe we have her back. Because she seemed knowledgeable and on top of.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, could we see if we can get a map and some details
Yeah.
written up by planning prior to the 19th, and then see if council can attend?
And Leslie, get
Yeah.
Leslie to come?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
sure.
Does that make
Yep.
sense? Okay. Oh, we good on that for tonight? Does anyone have any committee reports?
So the Board of Health met last week or so and still continued to deliberate over the bathroom issue for restaurants. Council for the various restaurants came in and asked the Board of Health to send a letter to the to the plumbers board, asking or telling them we supported basically the status quo ante for restaurants on Nantucket, but then asked us to actually stipulate an occupancy based on what the current current status quo is. As we know, that's pretty unclear, as my view is. And that's, again, I know town administration is evaluating that. It's going to come back hopefully in the fall. So Roberto actually had an excellent proposal, which was we would send a letter and ask the plumbing board to accept if you have 3 bathrooms now, 3 bathrooms in the future is okay too. So, and I don't know if you've heard back, if you've sent that letter. Okay, do you want to maybe come up and?
Yes, everyone is on board. It seems to that intersection with the health department section where the bathrooms were the point seems to have kind of resolved that portion of the occupancy issue. Because if, for example, the galley has 5 bathrooms, so the letter recommendation will say we support occupancy numbers based on 5 bathrooms. Right. It's up to the state if they want to decide, 200 people is okay for the galley. That we can't say anything, or if they say, 5 bathrooms can fit this many people. That's up to the state. But what we're saying is we're supporting our local restaurants with the bathrooms they have now. And we've received great feedback.
So we all decided that the benefits of Roberto's studies at Johns Hopkins for his PhD are already rubbing off because he came up with this exquisite solution.
Thank you. Oh, thank you.
You're not going to argue it. I could argue it for you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, I'm brilliant.
That's it. That's all I have.
Any other committee reports? Okay. Somebody want to make a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.